As you just heard, the meeting is being recorded, so thank you for accepting that. Welcome, everyone. This is our session on adding value by leading with a global mindset, and it is organized in collaboration with ASAE's International Association Advisory Council. My name is Joanne Yoham, and I am the incoming chair of the council, and very proud to be working with the professionals who will be speaking today. Before we get started, let me remind you that this is a live session. We suggest that you turn the speaker's side-by-side view on, and that is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, so that you can see the person who is presenting at one time, together with the slide presentation. We have muted everyone, but we really want to hear from all of you through the chat function and ask you to put your comments in there. We also have some polls and some trivia questions along the way. If there is time at the end, we will ask for questions and answers. While we wait another few minutes for people to join, we are going to have a short game that I'm sure you will enjoy, and it's a good way to get to know our presenters. Here are the photos of our three presenters. Study them, please. And there's some information on the side about the experiences that affect their business practices today, where they were raised, how many languages they speak, and at what age they moved to the United States. For this game, you have to guess what information fits with which person in the photos. Just note your answers down. Take a few minutes to really study the information, try to figure out who's who, A, B, or C, and we will reveal the answers in a few moments. It's not really that easy, is it, unless you know the people with whom you are speaking. I think everyone should have had enough time by now. Sharon, could you please change the slide? Here we are, and here are the answers. If you guessed them correctly, you can really get bragging rights because unfortunately we do not have prizes to give out today. But what we do note is that all of our speakers grew up in different countries. All of them speak multiple languages, and all have experienced major life transitions. So now that you can put the names to their experience, let me bring on our three presenters and allow them briefly to introduce themselves. Sharon, over to you.
Thank you, Joanne. My name is Shirin Köprücü. Welcome all. I came to the United States 19 years ago after an international career in Roche and Novartis, and working and living in Switzerland, the UK, and Turkey. This experience built my understanding of how to increase organizational performance in a global context through leadership development. I am a certified global mindset and quantum negotiation facilitator through Thunderbird School of Global Management, where I also teach related courses in the executive education program. At Strategic Straits, I work with leaders to increase their confidence, energy, and effectiveness levels in an interconnected and fast-changing world. And I have been an ASAE member since 2007, and I'm currently serving my second term in the International Association's Advisory Council. Thank you very much, and over to you, Guy.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone. You must be wondering how my name is pronounced. I know it's actually Guilherme Lopes, but I go by Guy or Guilherme, as some of my professional colleagues call me. Hi Shamika, hi Morgan. I see both of you in the chat here. So I just want to say hello. I've been in the nonprofit industry for about 10 years now. I worked for the Institute of Internal Auditors, both in Brazil and in the US. My last title was Managing Director of Global Relations. And for the last year and a half, I've been with the ISTAT, which is a global nonprofit association in the aviation sector out of Chicago. I'm the executive director for the association, and it's been a new challenge and very exciting challenge. Over to you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Guy. Hi, welcome. It's a pleasure to have so many people on this webinar. So my name is Sylvia Gonner. As the slide mentioned, I'm originally from Europe, now living in the US. I speak 6 languages. I've worked on all continents and have traveled extensively to more than 70 countries. That's because I've worked in the association industry my entire career, and I have a long-standing record of volunteering for ASAE, currently also serving on ASAE's International Associations Advisory Council. So with my company, CultureWiz, I offer a multitude of services in association management, specialize in international growth, cross-cultural training and development, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. So now let me hand it over back to Sharon to go over the agenda and get us started.
Thank you, Sylvia. Again, welcome everyone. Good to connect with you all on a big interest area for the 3 of us, but not only because of our international backgrounds, but also because how international business is becoming a big part of the general business paradigm. So together we will review 3 key trends that are affecting associations today, before we then transition into the value of a global mindset from various different perspectives, and then help you gain a better command of 3 leadership attributes within this framework: global savviness, curiosity, adventure, curiosity and adventure, and diplomacy. Hopefully we will have time at the end to answer some questions, but we have quite a few activities integrated for us to interact throughout the session. So enjoy, and let's start with our first trend. The world is changing fast, and it can be very much credited to a main trend, the interconnection. Zoom surprised us all with when they reported 300 million daily participants in April 2020. You may all remember, compared with their 10 million participants only end of 2019. We know now that over half of the world population is on social media. We know that when we have a commercial website, we open up ourselves to the entire world. And add to that the increasing number of devices, Internet of Things, apps, the additional artificial intelligence that we can all integrate. And then recently we conducted a survey with another consulting firm, Factum Global, the 2021 and Beyond survey. And in this survey, more than half of the association respondents reported increased international presence in their virtual meetings. So the possibility to connect is better than ever. However, the world is not flat. To convert that presence into engagement, we need to be aware of local and regional market dynamics, and it is crucial to pay attention to cultural, economic, legal, and political market differences. Otherwise, it is very easy to clash, even with a great business plan, to clash with local entities, local conditions. And we've also seen that physical as well as digital viruses can go around very easily in today's world. So how can we capitalize? The key question becomes, how can we capitalize on great opportunities in this interconnected world while mitigating the risks and costs of doing business? So that takes us to our next reality, which is very familiar to you. Hybrid is the new reality. Associations have started using technology not only for communications, but also product development. Many of the events turned into virtual events, large conferences into hybrid experiences. And in our survey, again, I'm sorry, I'm going to mention that later. What we are observing that in-person events will start again, but these virtual and hybrid events have proven their unique value to all of us. Now, in addition to all this, more than half of the workforce does not want to go back to office. They want to continue working from home. In our survey, 44% of association respondents said that they are willing to hire international workers for their international operations and work in remote capacity with them. So again, there are great opportunities, but there is risk with inequalities, as you can imagine, with technology, diversity, equity, and inclusion challenges, cybersecurity challenges, as well as mental health and well-being challenges. So again, the critical question becomes, how do we capitalize on opportunities while mitigating the risks and costs of this? The third trend is the demand for impact. The interconnection through global media as well as global brands enable people around the world to demand impact. As Sylvia said in our preparations, at no other time has the entire world focused on something common so quickly. So a big discussion around shared value generation versus corporate social responsibility started about 10 years ago, and it's becoming more and more prominent. So those of you who enjoy Nespresso know that Nestle recycles the Nespresso pods. We also see that car manufacturers can't race fast enough to produce electrical cars as soon as possible. So even if the consumers are not ready to drive these, very soon, that's what we will be purchasing. And so businesses have started looking at value not as the solution of a problem, but the solution of the problem less the cost of the business model that is around that problem. So this shift, though, is not easy to make for leaders because the existing business mentality has been around for too long a time, the focus on profitability, right? This gives associations an amazing opportunity to lead. There is so much to learn about the new environment and what businesses can do for consumers, for the society actually. And there's also an urgency to lead, right? The conventional revenues for associations are disrupted not only due to pandemic, not only due to virtual technologies, but innovation can come from anywhere. So the critical questions become, how can associations start reinventing their value propositions as well as the business models around these? How can they start working with diverse stakeholders, and how can they facilitate the necessary conversations with acceptable financial frameworks? So all this hints to great change, and experts call this the fourth industrial revolution. So there is change. We see a technology fusion that connects different, that blur the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres. We see this especially in healthcare as consumers, but in all sorts of industries. So in our survey, 48% of association respondents also worried about the leadership at their organizations. Will our leadership be able to embrace this new environment? So with this, I will stop talking and ask you, what do you think about the opportunities for your organization in this environment? Is your organization ready to respond? How do you feel as a leader in your role? So let me stop and hand over the microphone to Sylvia.
Thank you, Sharon, for that introduction. Yes, so at this point, we'd like you to answer in the chat feature, how is change affecting your association? So you can just drop the number 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat so we can get a sense of our participants. Do you mainly see opportunities? Are you worried about this environment? Is it a little bit of both? Or are you not sure how it is affecting specifically your association? So I'll give you a few seconds to drop your answers in the chat before we move on to our next poll. Thank you for those responses. So on the next poll, we want to ask you to share with us what your association is doing or planning to do this year to embrace the new environment. So we've heard from a lot of organizations, and again, drop the numbers in there. You're probably doing a multitude of things. Is your organization updating its strategic plan? Are you exploring international growth opportunities, investing in new technology, planning for the future of the workplace and the workforce? Are you adding diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to your strategies? Are you addressing new skills for staff development? What about board training? Are you conducting any new board training or executive coaching? And finally, something that is at the core of this topic today, are you conducting any global training and coaching for your staff or volunteers?
Very good. Yeah, we see all sorts of activities. It's an engaged group. Lots of updating strategic plans and exploring international. So we do see that. And we see a lot of 4s and 5s, planning for the future of the workforce, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts. Okay, please keep these, keep your answers coming. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but it's great that we can all have this experience exchange, and all of these actions are necessary in this environment. We are living in revolutionary times. What may not be immediately evident, however, is the need for global training, global leadership and management training, as well as coaching. The shifts one needs to make in international leadership and management are not easy. So knowledge by itself may not be enough. Coaching has a different role in this as well. The new environment with its interconnection and its fast change requires new perspectives, new organizational values, and new behavior. The good news is that this interconnection has existed in the world of international business, and international business professionals have been wondering, how is leadership different, right? How can we pass on good practices? And Thunderbird School of Global Management, being in the field, led a study called the Global Mindset Study around 2008-2010, and came up with the definition of, with a scientifically proven definition of the global mindset. And remember, these all came from a lot of qualitative and quantitative research. So it was defined as the individual attributes that help influence individuals, groups, and organizations that are unlike the leaders. Also, what we noticed is 3 main domains emerging with this concept: the intellectual capital, the social capital, and the psychological capital. We will go into more detail in the rest of the presentation, in the rest of the session with this model, so I'm not going into detail. But what I would like you to notice is that how the psychological capital got pronounced with this model as well. Because the life of an international business professional is a life of transition and major change. So when they identified the inventory that assesses global mindset levels, validated this in 62 countries, they also saw that the model correlates with independent leadership indicators, including courageous leadership. And with this, I want to conclude with a personal story. So I have, as you've heard, long time of international business experience, as well as prior very diverse growing up experience. And I was looking, when I wanted to advise companies and professionals, I was looking for a model. And I noticed that cultural adaptation alone would not bring success. And that's what we had at that time. However, during the holiday season of 2010, I noticed the Global Mindset model online and contacted the school, asked them if they could delay their certification program a little bit so I can attend as well. So sure enough, they did. And I flew with my toddler from Turkey back to the US, dropped her off in DC, and went to New York to get certified. I'm one of the first certified professionals in Global Mindset. And I advise, because of this model, with great confidence and enthusiasm. With this, I'd like to hand over the microphone to Sylvia, who will share the details of her experience as well as the model.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, so for me, I really feel that I've been successful working as an international association executive thanks to my global mindset, which I initially acquired from my international upbringing, but it truly has been a journey. And I've been focusing my career in international relations and developing expertise in everything multicultural, to the point that a global mindset for me has become a natural habit, a way of thinking, just the way my brain functions. So I started to research, how do you form a habit? And in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he defines a habit as the intersection of knowledge, desire, and skills. So years ago, I started to use these 3 components to expand my own global abilities and to help others, my staff and colleagues and clients, develop a global mindset. So I want you to think about global mindset as the intersection of knowledge, which is knowing what to do, desire, which is your motivation, your need to explore, and skills, which is the how to, the actual behavior and ability to operate with a global mindset. So what's interesting for me, when Sharon introduced me to the Global Mindset Framework, she mentions that they teach at the Thunderberg School of Global Management, is that it's actually a perfect match to the method I developed on my own experience. There's these 3 elements of a habit: knowledge, desire, and skill, and they match the components of the Global Mindset Framework. The knowledge is what they call the intellectual capital, the desire is the psychological capital, and the skills is the social capital. And the entire Global Mindset Framework includes 9 dimensions: global business savviness, cosmopolitan outlook, cognitive complexity, passion for diversity, quest for adventure, self-assurance, intercultural empathy, interpersonal impact, and diplomacy. Now, in our session today, we'll only address 4 of these as they relate to our association community, but you should keep in mind that all 9 are critical to truly developing a global mindset. So let's start by looking at global savviness, or what we call the knowledge part of the habit, the ability to know what to do. It largely depends on staying informed on what goes on in the world when it comes to our work in international associations or in association management. And if you're expanding to foreign markets, it's about doing your research and gathering background information. It requires us to understand the market, the consumers, the competitors, and our particular profession or industry. So there are 4 aspects to global savviness and association management. The first one, as indicated here, is researching and understanding the state of your industry, in particular, in any particular market where you're looking to expand. For example, your industry may be impacted by different standards in different countries, or you may need to find out if professional practices are the same or different. So I'm going to call on Guy to share with us an example of what he's dealt with in his professional life.
Sure. Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, this difference in standards across countries is quite common, right? In several industry and sectors, such as medical, financial, aviation, my sector, in my case right now, highly regulated. But a good example I can give you is from my previous employer, the IIA, the Institute of Internal Auditors. So the IIA is a global standard setting for internal audit. Just so you understand the magnitude of their business, the IIA has, I think, members in more than 200 countries, in chapters in 110 plus countries, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory is not failing me. This is great, right? But it's extremely complex. There were several instances where local laws and regulations would conflict with our standards. I remember one case in Africa, if I'm not mistaken, it was in Malawi, where we had to work with the local government because they were about to pass a new law that it was not aligned with the best global practices that the IIA was promoting across the globe. Maturity is also another issue that you must keep in mind. I'm going to use the IIA again as an example, but the IIA offers a global certification called the Certified Internal Auditor, CIA. The CIA in some countries is seen as an easy exam, like the basic knowledge, the foundation upon which every internal auditor should operate. In other countries, the CIA is seen as a premium qualification, a real plus to internal auditors in that country. After all, it usually comes down to the maturity of the profession in that specific country. So in summary, to summarize, to operate in a global market, you must understand that there will be several differences that you will have to deal with.
Thank you, Guy. Sharon, can you click on the next component? I want to jump to that one. The next component of global savviness is researching and understanding who are the current suppliers, potential competitors in that particular market that you may be interested in expanding to or that you're working with. Guy, again, can you share with us an example of what that looks like?
Absolutely. So research is extremely important, but it's not simple. To be comprehensive enough, you need to engage several players in your industry. Each one of these players will give you different pieces of information. I've worked in projects in Africa, Asia, Europe in my career. So I'll give you some examples of resources that you can use. The first one is your existing members, right? So if you have members from that specific region that you are planning to do some work on, you can create a task force, right? And these people will help you collect information from the local community. They can help you conduct some local research or even translate some key documents. Training companies. They will help you better understand pricing models, preferred teaching methods in that specific region. Associations, especially the ones where there is common ground or common interest, that will help you better understand the local laws and regulations about nonprofits. They can also help you connect with potential volunteers, maybe help promote your association, have a co-host some sort of event. Government entities, at the IA was the Ministry of Finance, here at ISTAT is the Ministry of Transportation. They will help you better understand laws and regulations about the profession, not the nonprofit industry, but the profession. And these are relationships that you definitely want to build. They're very important. Universities, right? They have existing research that you can use. You can learn more about courses being taught at the college or postgraduate level. Something I deal with pretty much on a daily basis is local laws in taxation. So you may want to have a local partner, like a local law firm or an accounting firm that will help you understand, VAT, taxation, and this is very complex. And last but not least, the internet, right? You can find a lot on the internet. A great tool that I use is Google search words. I don't know if you use that, but you can go on Google and you can set up, keywords that you want to receive news about. So one that I did for Vietnam, and there was some of my colleagues that worked with me on Vietnam are here. We used to track anything that was Vietnam internal audit. So on a weekly basis, we would receive all the news about internal audit in Vietnam, and that kind of helped us shape our thought and strategy better.
Great, Guy. Those are great leads. And as a matter of fact, we're going to share in the chat a resource with a whole list of websites and other resources related to this topic. So the third component to global savviness is developing an understanding of the preferred customs and marketing strategies in any market. You cannot assume that one size fits all. What works in one country will not work in another. So for example, if you have photos of people on your website or in your marketing collateral, chances are you are localizing your brand and your marketing efforts. It's a good start to show diversity in your photos, but you have to remember that diversity looks very different if you reside in the US or in China, for example. So you also have to be careful if you select images or design slogans that may be interpreted differently than you intended. Cultural values impact our perception of everything, including images. So one association I worked for, we learned that the sports car selected to promote its premier certification was not seen as a positive image in Scandinavian countries, where it's considered poor taste to show off your wealth. And so it's impossible to localize advertising for every market, but having 2 or 3 versions of a campaign can be a really good approach. And finally, the fourth component is having knowledge of how to do business in various markets and understanding the associated risks that you will need to consider. So Guy mentioned laws such as GDPR, global data privacy regulations that impact anyone doing business with European countries is critical. You should consider the impact of VAT, the value-added tax, currency fluctuations, and you may want to pay attention to differences in business practices regarding contracts, for example. There's different rules that apply when it comes to hotel room blocks and attrition, legal, financial, cultural implications that will impact your business. But this is all part of the knowledge piece of it. So with that, we're going to move on to the trivia part. And this is where we are going to test a little bit your knowledge of some basic info. Go back to trivia number 1, please. There we go. So do you know how many time zones there are in China? Is it 1, is it 3, or is it 5? So again, put your answer into chat. As a hint, Russia has 11 time zones. So let us know how many you believe there are in China. Is it? I see a lot of answers coming in, and I might have confused it with the ABC or the 135, but both answers would be accepted. It's a bit of a trick question. Actually, China only has 1 time zone, surprisingly. I just learned this recently myself, although geographically they could have 5. Fun fact. Let's go on to the next trivia question. How many countries are there in Africa? Is it 23, 38, or 54? So type in your answers, A, B, or C. I see some of our people who work at the Institute of Internal Auditors, they notice, because we have their members in many of these countries. Well, here's the surprising answer for some of you. It's 54. Africa includes 54 sovereign countries, 48 on the continent, plus 6 island nations. And these are as diverse as you can imagine, with major differences in languages, a multitude of currencies, and very diverse rules and regulations to conduct business. And we don't always think about that diversity when it comes to this continent that we refer to as Africa, more often than some of the islands, some of the countries. So with that, back to our framework. So let's now look at the next components, the quest for adventure and self-assurance. So these components are part of the desire and the motivation that we should have to explore global issues. So on the next slide, we will look at how some of us have this desire, this motivation as part of our upbringing and personality. Clearly, Guy, Sharon, and myself, we have always had a quest for adventure. All three of us left our families and our home countries, and as young adults, we came to live in the US. We have an innate sense of adventure, a natural desire to explore, learn languages, and adapt to new cultures. But it's likely some of you have that desire and background as well. I know some of you who are on this call, or maybe the motivation to develop a global mindset comes from working in an international association, or you're attending this session because you're working in a national association that wants to explore international opportunities. The curiosity typically leads to a quest for adventure. That means being willing to take risks and even enjoy unpredictable situations. Eventually, the curiosity and sense of adventure helps build assurance. You feel more self-confident and more comfortable with the uncomfortable, so to speak. So Guy, again, could I ask you to share with us how your curiosity and quest for adventure led you to build up confidence in other cultures that were foreign to you?
Sure. So there is an interesting story that happened many years ago. We were in Santiago in Chile for the regional conference, which brings over 1,000 people every year. And we got there a few days before the conference for a workshop. And then we learned that one of the keynote speakers couldn't make it to the conference. So they asked me if I wanted to present as a keynote speaker the next day. So 24 hours from now in Spanish. For those of you who know geography really well, I speak Portuguese. That's my, in Brazil we speak Portuguese, but I was learning Spanish. So I accepted, I was interested in testing my own ability, and and it was a challenging situation. And it was totally unpredictable because, I was not expecting to do that. So I had to come up with my presentation and rehearse it in one day. And it was a huge risk, right? Because things could go wrong and it could be such a disaster, right? So I go on stage the next day in front of 1,000 people to speak in Spanish, a language that I was learning. Hopefully, I think thankfully was a success, and the presentation was well received, so much so that I started doing that every year at the same conference, and then in Africa as well, and then did that in Europe a few times. So that kind of helped me build the self-confidence to do that, and it helped me become comfortable with the uncomfortable. So that's my story.
It's a great way for you to test your own abilities, and successfully at that. How about you, Sharon? Can you share an experience with us?
I would love to, because I find curiosity and quest for adventure are the critical success factors when living and working well in different countries with different cultures. I will go into a professional example, but I never forget how my parents, when they moved to Germany, and I was about 8 years old, they were so worried how I would do in school because I didn't speak a word of German. And for me as a child, it was all about curiosity. What will I see? What will I hear? What kind of friends will I make? So this was different in my adult life. When I came to the United States, and I had to deliver learning sessions, it became very evident to me very soon that time is money in every way, but definitely in the sessions like we're running today. And I tend to create a lot of content. And I also can communicate in very indirect and circular ways. I love building relationships, not only with others, between me and learners, but also between learners. So learning sessions, and imagine they're in person, could go easily over time. And I've noticed that, of course, from feedback. So this created a lot of worry and anxiety in me. But just like Guy, delivering again and again at conferences, different events, getting embarrassed many times, but then content at other times led me to finally delivering, like it became the delivery of good sessions became a norm rather than an outlier. And it led to a different mindset as well. I want to emphasize this. Today I am very, I love delivering different sessions with diverse speakers, creating different experiences. And it's so crucial in our changing environment when innovation is required, creative learning opportunities are required. So it made me a risk taker. Thank you, Sylvia.
Excellent. Well, these kind of changes, it may be easier said than done. You know, in many cases, people who are immersed in another culture will struggle. It's quite normal, of course, because it involves change. It requires us to adapt our behavior and habits to a different way of doing things. And in doing so, we may feel frustrated or anxious, especially when these changes conflict with the basic values and the beliefs that we grew up with. And I certainly experienced a huge culture shock when I moved from Brussels to Miami for college. While I enjoyed and embraced the American way of doing things, I was so confused at times. I even resented having to change my ways. When it comes to cultural differences, there is no right or wrong way. There's no better or worse. Fundamentally, however, our culture or our cultures, if we grew up in a multicultural setting, they're at the core of our identity. And that doesn't necessarily change even as we get older, at least not easily. So over the years, I was relieved to learn that I'm not alone feeling these challenges of adapting, and that there's a way to manage this. Adapting to another culture should not mean abandoning your own way and values. And so I really like Andy Malinsky's book called Global Dexterity, which is based on the ability to adapt your behavior across cultures without losing yourself in the process. And I recommend this book because he provides a number of techniques for doing so. To be ready to adapt, however, it's first important to understand where the challenges come from. We all struggle with three main challenges: the authenticity challenge, the competence challenge, and the resentment challenge. And I'll give you an example. I really felt the authenticity challenge early on when I came to the States, and I was told that I should not discuss politics or religion if I didn't want to lose friends here in the US. And that was confusing to me because I found Americans to be very open and transparent in just about everything else, much more than Europeans. Americans are willing to share personal details of their lives and their finances and their families and their health in ways that Europeans keep much more private. So why couldn't we discuss politics and religion? Why is that taboo? I grew up in a society that is very comfortable disagreeing and challenging each other's beliefs, even amongst close friends. We debate philosophy, religion, current events. We argue, we play devil's advocate, and we still walk away loving each other. So I really felt this authenticity challenge, and I still do sometimes, but eventually I got used to it, especially, I would say, recently, when I saw how much political differences can break up friendships and families. So I would say it's a common one. The other one, these challenges happen in business, of course. They are part of how people will build trust, how they perceive fairness. Culture impacts everything: how we see authority, how we give feedback, how we delegate, make decisions, value time. So clearly we notice these challenges when we undertake diversity, equity, and inclusion training, because this transcends into that area as well. This isn't just about global. As an example of a competence challenge where my skills do not add up to the task, let's say you have an assignment in Korea and you're aware that there's a lot of protocol in that country. Maybe you're not comfortable attending a meeting with Korean members if you don't know anything about greeting expectations or the gift giving practice or rules around who sits where, who speaks first. Very common. And then for the resentment challenge, I had a colleague that felt anxious and frustrated whenever we went to Japan because she was a picky eater and she couldn't find anything she liked on the menu. And she was even embarrassed having to take off her shoes or sit on the floors in some of our more traditional dinners. So this person experienced the resentment challenge. So we want to hear from you. Which of these challenges, which one has been the biggest one that you've dealt with in dealing with another culture? Have you experienced authenticity, feeling insincere, having conflicts with your own values, competence challenges, being embarrassed, or resentment challenges, feeling frustrated? Please drop any and all of these or pick your main one in the chat feature. No matter how long we have been working, living in another culture, you know, we always feel some of these at any one time. It gets better. You always learn. Great. Thank you so much. So for our next slide, we want to get into the final component, which is diplomacy. It falls under the skills needed to form a habit. It's part of the social capital of the global mindset framework. Why we selected diplomacy? Because it's a really critical skill set. It addresses how you develop a global mindset. What skills does it take? Next. Diplomacy is demonstrated by the comfort we have to maybe start a conversation with a person from another culture that we don't know. It's demonstrated by our empathy, our ability to listen and try to understand what others have to say, even when it makes absolutely no sense to us. But chances are this is rooted in cultural differences. More often than not, particularly in a multicultural environment, right? When you're surrounded with people from many different countries, we will hear different perspectives. For example, people around the world have very different ways to express disagreement, some in very open and vocal ways and direct ways, and others in very subtle ways that you will not know at first glance. A diplomat will learn to integrate these differences and bring people together under common ground, foster collaboration. And I want to say, by the way, these are the same skills that we need when we conduct diversity, equity, and inclusion type of work. Diplomacy and empathy are not only useful in a global context, these skills are helping us work across differences in ethnicities, in religions, genders, generations, physical and mental abilities. So it's a very helpful skill set to develop. And I want to bring Guy back for him to share with us, you know, how have you used your diplomatic skills to work in global associations, and why was this such an important component of developing global mindset, Guy?
Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, I've worked with many global boards and committees. Usually these committees and boards are comprised of people from pretty much every corner of the world. At ISTAT, for example, we have 20 committees, and I try to join their meetings as often as possible. So running committees and boards like that, it's like running a mini United Nations meeting, and it's not easy, right? It's not easy managing cultural differences, diversity, personalities, right? For example, usually those who speak English fluently tend to dominate the meeting, for instance, right? So as the staff liaison or as the global leader for these boards and committees, it is our responsibility to connect with everyone, to build a relationship, and to ensure that everyone feels like they belong. A story from my career back in the day when I was learning a lot about diplomacy, I was a staff liaison for this committee with 20 people from different countries. It was easy for me to connect with people from Latin America. I was born in Latin America. I speak Portuguese, I speak Spanish. It was easy for me to connect with people from the United States. That's where I live. That's where my family's from. So that was easy with people from Europe. It was also easy because I lived in Europe. people from Africa. As I told you before, I had been to Africa many times, so I had the chance to really build stories with these people that we could, talk about. But with the Asians, that was a region that had very little knowledge. I had been to Asia just a few times. I couldn't speak their language, and I was struggling a little bit connecting with the Asians. So one day we were having dinner, and a friend of mine who now is a friend of mine from Japan was there with us, and then we were having a few drinks, and people left, and it was just me and him. And then we started talking about our families. We shared pictures. We shared personal stories, and from that day on, we really created a great connection. And he was very quiet in those meetings, so I finally had the courage to ask him why. And his response was, "Well, you never asked me what my opinion was." So I never actually addressed him during the meeting so he could give us his input. And that was a lesson that I learned, that I had to really be mindful of everyone in that room and how everyone connected with the group, right? So there was a lesson that I learned and that I carry with me, and that served as a lesson for future meetings and things that I do now that I didn't do in the past.
Great story, Guy. And building those relations and being able to understand how different cultures communicate is really critical when it comes to negotiating. And you have to make, arrangements regarding, an event you may be doing in other part of the world. So Sharon, can you share with us some techniques that we can use to ease negotiations across cultures?
Absolutely. The Guy story resonated with me so much that another experience came to my mind. If you don't mind, I'll share this real quickly. We were conducting a training for working in Asia, and the culture resource trainer who's experienced with Asia said, when you work with China, you need to know the 3 F areas: family, food, finance. These are areas people like to talk about, and they like to share personal information, which you may not be very comfortable with sharing. So before you start your conversations, think about yourself a little bit, become more self-aware, and think about what you might be willing to share so that you can build good relationships and connect on common ground. I thought that was a really good story that just stuck in my mind. And you're very right. We now live in an era where we get more and more than ever opportunities for partnerships and negotiations. The interconnections across the interconnection is closing the geographic gap, as well as a lot of hierarchical gaps. So instead of thinking, okay, what leverage do we have? What power do we have? We are very much advised now to connect with others, to pursue what we need by creating shared awareness, a lot of positive intent, and good amount of problem solving. So we talked, for instance, and these are the elements of quantum negotiation. The strategies and tactics evolve around shared awareness, building positive intent, and problem solving. And we talk about different cultural competence methodologies here. There are quite a few that we can tap into in that problem solving. And this is what helps us achieve results in our quantum world, totally interconnected across geographies and across hierarchies and across other gaps. With this, right, I continue and conclude what we know more of from the global mindset. So all the elements, the different elements Sylvia went over, remember that they came out in extensive research. They were significantly different elements, statistically significant elements. And the model helps us be successful not only in our a globally interconnected world now, but also in a significantly changing world. We are able to measure levels of global mindset, and we are able to help people increase their knowledge, build strategies, and build their psychological stamina to work across cultures, as well as across markets and across change. The beauty of working with a scientifically developed model, and you may conclude that in your own experience, is in two ways. One is you can truly understand what development activity is being effective, and we've shared several different resources here. And two, what are the rewards? What is the return on your time investment for learning? That's another benefit of working with a trademark global mindset. In either way, we hope that you enjoyed the session, and I give the word back to Sylvia for additional resources.
Great, thank you very much. So that kind of brings us to the conclusion of our session, and we hope you enjoyed it and learned a few things that you can use in your daily life and work. You know, developing and cultivating a global mindset, it's really not a destination. It's cliche to say, but it is truly a lifelong journey, and you can embark on this at any point in your life and career. There's a lot of ways to acquire the knowledge, the skills, the desire to prepare us to operate in the diverse and ever-changing global era that we live in. And they don't all involve travel or intensive training. Now, if you like podcasts, watching TV, or reading, in this slide, we listed a few programs and books that touch on cultural issues. So it's a fun way to learn about it. We've included these and many other references on the file that was shared in the chat. And of course, Shirin, Guy, and myself are also available to assist you. So feel free to check out our websites where you will find additional resources, and do not hesitate to contact us. And I want to thank all of our presenters and our facilitator, Joanne, and all of you for attending this session today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us here today.